Thanks for joining us on Over My Dead Body, the podcast hosted by Nicola Reeder and Carl Tate that aims to bust those myths about all things funerals and answer the questions you never dared ask. So stick in your earbuds, listen, and then send us your questions for the things we still haven't answered for you. Happy listening. Welcome back to Series 2, Episode 9 of Over My Dead Body. Have you got over last week's episode yet? We know that was a really tough one for Bex, but we are so proud of her for coming and sharing her story with us, and we've had some amazing feedback. So thank you to everyone who's been in touch, and for those of you who asked us for help, we hope that you found some of the help. If not, keep getting in touch. But Carl, welcome back this week.
Good evening. Yeah, great. It's great to be back as always.
How are you this week?
Not so bad, thanks. Yeah, same old in the funeral world. Very busy. But yeah, continuing to do what we do. How's your week been?
It's been good, thank you. It's a bit of an unusual one today. Doesn't often cross our path as celebrants, but I had a double funeral. So a husband and wife, both died within a few days of each other. So we had 2 coffins, 2 hearses, 2 limousines, 2 eulogies, 2 committals, which is really, really tough on the family, but actually, to a certain degree, quite comforting that those vows that mum and dad made 60 odd years ago, till death us do part, that never have they been more true than today.
Yeah.
And one could not have lived without the other.
No. I think in all the years I've been doing, I think I've never done 2, both in church, and they were carried down the aisle together. So yeah, it was. It's a difficult time for families, but sometimes it's quite a nice, a nice way. To hold a service is to have them both together.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you lose 2 people very close together, to put yourself through 2 funerals is just too painful. So that's kind of a beautiful way to talk about their onward journey together, so never having to be separated. And it doesn't have to be a great big long service. We were still only kind of half an hour because that's all the family wanted, something simple and respectful still. So yeah, bit of a different one, but it's always nice as a celebrant to challenge your creativity a little bit. So.
Definitely.
So what we got on the podcast this week then, Carl, you've been the one talking to our guests more than I have. So who have we got lined up for this week?
Okay, so guys, for this week, we've got Hayley and we've got Claire. So we're just going to hand over to you and just do me a bit of an introduction. Tell us who you are and, what your a brief outline of what your roles are. Fire away, Hayley.
Okay, thank you. It's nice to be here and to sort of shed a bit of light onto what we do within specialist palliative care. So myself and Claire are specialist palliative care nurses. Some people sort of say, what is that? And actually, it's a massive, big, I don't know, it's there's lots of things really, isn't there, within specialist palliative care. I'm like, what is it? What is it? What does it do?
So how long have you been doing this?
So I've been nursing for 13 years now. And you? 6, 7? Oh no. I've got a teenager.
Anyone under the age of 30 will not know that was on there.
It's horrible. Yeah. So a few years, and we both started out in sort of district nursing land, really. So we were providing care to patients in community. So a lot of that was, very varied. But within that, palliative care was part of our role in end of life care. So we found that we were looking after patients with life-limiting illnesses that were sort of at many stages really of their diagnosis, because that ultimately is what palliative care is. It's looking after somebody. It's the care of somebody that has got a life-limiting diagnosis. Could be cancer, could be a long-term condition, and it's just something that's not curative, isn't it? And it's how we live with that. It's how they live with that. A lot of people will see palliative care as being end of life, isn't it? And it's just, if you've got a palliative diagnosis, that's it, you're going to die. And actually, that's very much not what it is. We see a lot of people that are early on in their diagnosis, a lot of people that are near an end of life. And I think with that, when we were district nursing, we did see a lot of people at the very end, didn't we? Yeah. And I think that, especially for me, was one of the reasons why I was like, actually, I want to specialise. This is where I want to be. It was so rewarding. I know it sounds really weird, doesn't it? But it was so rewarding. It was part of probably district nursing job that I was like, it was something that I was really passionate about, because you've got one chance to get it right. And I think seeing somebody at home and kind of have that care at home is just really special, because it's all about the person.
And I think what Hayley says there is right. A lot of people think palliative care is just end of life. That's a huge part of what we do. But for me, I think when I think about palliative care and what we provide, that's about supporting life. People can have these terminal diagnoses for a very long time. As a community, as a country, you know, our life expectancy is forever increasing, but we're not necessarily living very well with that. So we do have a large pocket of people who unfortunately have these horrible conditions and situations they've been diagnosed with, where actually they might live for quite a few years yet, but with quite a lot of symptom burden, whether that's physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual. Very much about the holistic approach in palliative care. You know, a lot of what we do is symptom management, but there's so much more to symptoms than what people necessarily think. So it is definitely about supporting life.
Yeah. I mean, it is amazing what you ladies do, and obviously all of the whole team is absolutely, it is incredible. And you are sort of the unsung heroes, really, in my eyes, because people really don't know, you know, much about you until they have to live it and go through it. Then they realise that there's this whole huge support network out there. And I think the reason that we wanted to have you on as to speak today is the whole point we did this podcast is to raise awareness and get people talking, just and having these conversations. And sometimes they are difficult conversations, but ultimately, when you're with these people, you know, how do you strike up this conversation? How does it come into play? What do you say? And, you know, how does it come about?
I think a lot of it's been with experience. You know, you've got to have a passion to do this, and actually sometimes you've got to be really brave. We have really difficult conversations, but like Claire says, it's about, you know, it's about being open and honest. And I think what somebody once said to me is, when you are preparing to give birth, you've got a plan. When you die, it's like, it's that taboo subject, isn't it? We better not talk about it. But actually, it's the one thing apart from birth that we've all got in common. We're all going to die. And I think sometimes for a lot of our patients, when you're given this diagnosis, so that fight or flight sort of thing comes in, and people are very much like, there's some people that are out there that are just like, you know, I give up and I can't, I don't want to live with this diagnosis. But then there's other people that are like, actually, do you know what? I'm going to make the most of life. I'm going to have my bucket list. I'm going to do this. I'm going to plan everything. And I think it's fair to say we've seen a lot of people that are scared, a lot of people that are very brave, a lot of people that do want to have the conversations, a lot of people that don't. But I think for us, our role is very much supporting everybody in where they're kind of at, if that makes sense. And it's sort of, sometimes it's being brave. It's about having those difficult conversations and saying, well, actually, if you weren't here, or if you weren't able to tell us what your wishes were, how do we know? How does your family know that, you know, we're not going to uphold these wishes? And I don't know about you, but I think we're very, like you said, when you mentioned the word holistic, and I think that's one of the big things that we do. The first thing that I always say to my patients, any of them, is this is about you. This is about you. What do you want? What support do you want? What do you want to talk about? And I think we can only signpost, can't we, and guide. And I think that's a massive part of our role, is sort of saying, well, actually, what's an issue? What's a problem? What can we do to make that better? What can we do to give you the best quality of life, of the life that you've got left?
And do you find when you're talking to do you call them patients or clients?
So the patients. Yeah, they are patients because we're nurses. So yeah, they are. They're in our.
So when you're chatting to them about kind of their fears and is it usually them that might raise a question about funerals and ceremonies, or do you kind of broach that with them and say, have you thought about what might happen after you die? Which way does it go?
It can go either way. It can go either way. Some people will be really forward and tell you straight away, lay it on the table. This is what I want to know. I want to know everything. There's other people that you can see, they want to know, but they don't want to start talking about it. And they're the one, you just take an individual approach to everybody, and you guys will be the same in what you do when you're meeting people. You get a feel for who needs what and what the right approach should be. There's quite often people who don't want to touch on it at all. It's important that we're led by them, offer the opportunity, give some warning shots maybe, even to say, look, there are some things that we could talk about today, but it might not be something you're ready to explore yet, and take your lead from there. But I myself could die on my soapbox about promoting conversations about death and dying. And you've got to be careful as well that you're not led by your own values and your own prerogative. And again, that, how you approach people does come with experience, and sometimes it can be a bit clunky, can't it? But it tends to be really quite natural, or I found comes quite naturally, doesn't it? The people who aren't ready for it will shut you down as quickly as, and you go from there. But there's some real power behind giving people the voice and the opportunity to talk about death and dying, particularly when we're talking about these palliative diagnoses that sometimes come out of nowhere and absolutely destroy a person and the family's life. Might well be that talking about death and dying is the thing that they fear the most, but by actually building that trust and that support up to enable the patient and those that are important to them to discuss that, you can give a lot of power back there. And that is where palliative care comes about living and not about just waiting to die.
And I agree, it's about that control. I think we're trying to empower people to have that control, that actually, they might be having some symptoms, but if we can, try and help with that, it's very much what does the patient want, I think, isn't it? We're very much trying to allow them, and I think we see as probably a bit like seed planters. We're very good at planting a seed and sort of saying, please stop me if you don't want to have these conversations. But I think again that probably comes over time and experience within our roles. That no two people are the same, no two diagnoses. I mean, again, you'll see, no two funerals are the same, no two services are the same. And I think that goes for, somebody could have a breast cancer diagnosis or, but actually you could have two people exactly the same diagnoses, but they could have a completely different outlook on life, completely different symptoms. So they're kind of, I don't like using the word, but their journey is very different. And I think for us, we do try and promote talking about it because it's that control.
And I think obviously with the work you do and how close that you get to the patients is you almost become their extended family. So they learn to trust you. You said it's all about building up the trust. Yeah. And sometimes, potentially the patients then feel that little bit more at ease talking to you than they would, the nearest and dearest, which again is credit to you for doing what you do.
And it goes back to, I think, one of our earlier episodes in this series with Katie Costello, who was the death doula and funeral celebrant, who was talking about, the biggest fear is talking about death and dying. And actually, with the people who are ready to embrace that, you're kind of taking the control back. You're taking the power and the fear out of that. And actually, it can make you feel a little bit more empowered, a little bit lighter for actually having this conversation. But it's tough. It's really tough.
And I think, the amount of patients that I see that think actually by starting to talk about death and dying means that they're bringing that bad luck onto them and they're accepting it, and that means they're going to possibly even die quicker than when they would have. So there's definitely an element of fear, thinking, well, if we talk about this, we acknowledge it, then it's going to happen. But actually,
it's going to happen anyway.
Exactly that. It's going to happen. So one of my favourite things to ask is what's important to you, and that can open that door up to that conversation quite easily, because that's where you will find they might say, well, it's my children, or it's not being in pain, or it's being alert and being up and and then that's when you can start talking about, well, what you're frightened of, what can we do to help you achieve what's important to you.
And when you're talking to your patients, if they want to talk to you something privately, in confidence, without their families, I guess you carry that responsibility. Like we carry that. There's often things that we're told that people will say, don't tell the rest of my family, or we don't know. So I guess that's a difficult position as well for you, in kind of, you are that confidant that they can speak to.
And we find that, and I think sometimes it's really apparent that sometimes it goes from both ways, because sometimes we've got a patient saying, I'm worried about this, I don't want to tell my family this, and then on the other hand, as we're leaving and walking out the door, you've got a relative that's going, can I just have a quick chat with you outside? And then you kind of, they're saying exactly the same thing that they're worried about, but they're not talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one of the things we probably see quite a lot, is
The fear of upsetting each other.
Absolutely. And it's like, actually, we've got a duty to our patients, confidentiality and all, everything that goes with it. So I think part of our role, we very much try and just say to people, have you spoken to your family? Because actually your worries, and you're worried about them, they're worried about you and how you're feeling. Actually, if you got together and you spoke and you sort of released that, 9 out of 10 times, we go back the next visit, or we ring to review, and it's like, oh, I've spoken to my family and we've had a lovely chat, and it's like a weight's been lifted. So I think it's remaining impartial, because we have to be there. We're not just there, ultimately we are there mainly for the patients, but we're also there for the families. It's about that wider network as well, and even carers. We support the healthcare professionals as well, because I think in healthcare sometimes our thoughts and feelings, because they are so different, and you might have a patient that has got a very clear path. I don't want any pain relief, I don't want this. And as healthcare professionals, we're very much like, we could help you, but if somebody doesn't want it, that's fine. And I think other professionals that are maybe involved as well, family members, other people are very much like, why are they not doing this? And it's like, well, you just need to respect their wishes. And it's the same, if somebody does say to us, I don't want to talk to my family about it, it's kind of exploring why not? And it's actually keeping that confidentiality, isn't it? And keeping those trusting relationships, but also knowing that sometimes it is trying to encourage people talking to each other, because the last thing you want is for people to kind of die and not say the things that they wish that they've said. And we do sometimes probably get that, very rarely.
Yeah.
But I think it's very much, it's not our job is about, it's kind of building those relationships and getting that trust from people and families, and knowing that support's there. And it's also recognising that actually if people don't need us, we can take a step back, because actually we often say, don't we, we're a bit like Nanny McPhee. We do, with the big thing, we're like Nanny McPhee minus the big, the big nose walks and the things. But it's kind of like, when you need us, we're there, but actually your time is precious. If we can get on top of symptoms, if we can give you the information, we can signpost. We're very lucky in our team, haven't we? Because we've got other professionals. We've got occupational therapists, we've got dietitians, we've got an early palliative team. We've got, some really wonderful services that actually, if we do what we need to do, it's about, actually, can we now take a step back? And it's sort of, it's kind of working with people, isn't it? And not just jumping in 2 foot and saying, this is what I'm here to do, blah, 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 and we're moving out. It's about building those relationships, knowing when it's our right time to say, actually, do you need us? Because some patients don't need us until end of life. Some people might, have a really good trajectory, mightn't they? But it's also knowing that we're kind of there in the background. We are that Nanny McPhee. I mean,
it is a really good point you make. As you said before, Claire, it's once people get this diagnosis, it's not, that's just it, that's the end.
Yeah.
It's about how you're going to live and learn to live with these things. And I think that's quite a commendable thing to do, because obviously you're there at the early stages when they get this, and you walk into that environment of, you never know what you're walking into. It's the same as, as we go into funeral arrangements and we have no idea what we're going into. Obviously, we're potentially aware of how the person has died, and every situation is different. But you've got to be able to learn to read the room, just make sure that you don't put your foot in it. You never want to do it on purpose. And Bex made a point last week about people asking questions that they just shy away from. And I think it's a good point. You just ask the questions, and people realise that you're not there to upset anybody, but just to be human.
And that's people don't have to answer those questions if they're not comfortable to do it. So there are some services that we'll do and conversations we'll have with families where we will never know a cause of death because they just don't want to tell you, and for a variety of reasons. And sometimes you will know because obviously when you've taken care of their loved one, there are things that you'll see. But I might never know because, I'm thinking sometimes when people have taken their own life, families don't want to tell you that because they don't want that to be reflected in the service. And I think it is just, if I ask that question and they say, no, it was a sudden death, you kind of very quickly go, okay, you don't want to talk about this. That's okay. So we'll move on to so how do we celebrate your loved ones? And I think it's for families thinking about, how do I start conversations with my loved one who's been given a terminal diagnosis? What would your advice be about starting conversations if somebody seems quite close to it?
I think the important thing to remember, whether you're a friend, a family member, or even a professional, is you're never always going to get it right. You can't. There's no right or wrong way to go about it. But you've got to just try, be there, and be present. And I mean that for healthcare professionals as well, because there will be times, like you're saying, Carl, you never want to put your foot in it, but you might well just do, and out of the most well-meaning thing that you can't always guarantee how things will be received. But I suppose if your question is, how do you approach that with somebody who doesn't seem ready to talk about it? Are you asking from the family's perspective?
Yeah, if you're a family member, and it's kind of, do you have any advice if somebody, one of your loved ones, had been given a terminal diagnosis but seemed like they didn't want to talk about it? Maybe what are some of the things that you can do to try and make them feel more comfortable?
I think the other thing as well is that you're open to everybody, aren't you? So it's the other thing is obviously you're looking after that individual patients, but they've got a whole support network of family members who can come to you as well. So that's something to be mindful of as well. So they can come to you as well for that sort of guidance as such.
Yeah, and there's lots of people out there. That's the thing in community, that there is. We're lucky because we've got lots of online resources now, and I think one of the biggest things that we would say to people is, try, if you're not quite sure, there are resources online, isn't there, that can, there's lots of things, like Winston's Wish, that does a lot of things about talking about to children about these diagnoses, the Macmillan websites and things, Marie Curie. There's lots of little things that are there to sort of prompt people, and I think sometimes it's about just kind of being a bit brave and just saying, look, I'm really worried. I know that we've got this diagnosis. Is there anything that you want to talk about? Is there anything that you feel that you can't tell me that you maybe want to? Is there anything really important to you that you would want us to know if you weren't able to tell us? And I think that in itself is probably opening up those conversations, because it goes back to previous when I was waffling before about, the patients and the families, they've both got the same worries but they don't talk to each other. It's one of those people being that brave one saying, actually, I want to talk about it. Are you keeping quiet because you want to but you don't know how to approach it? And I think because we've got there's Dying Matters, isn't there, every week? Hospice UK have got the Dying Matters, which you'll know about, and we really try and promote it.
You can start by promoting our podcast now, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Don't get worried. We've got something up we lined up ready for this year, and we, as a team, we try every year to actually, do something, whether it be in the hospital, isn't it, or at work, or I think once we did one at Tesco. I think a few years ago we did one at Tesco, and I can always remember when I was a district nurse, because to me it was so important to have these conversations. Even as a district nurse, I was like, so I hosted an event down at the local health centre, and we had funeral directors there, we had different organisations, carers, all those things, and people were in. And actually, I can remember you came down, Claire.
I took my dad down for just for a day out, and he's like,
That's here, meet a parent director.
he was like, what are you taking to me to this for? But again, because I was still a student nurse, and I was like, well, you know what? These are the sort of things that are important, and actually, that's been a good way for us to be a bit more open about some wishes within us as a family, because I think actually we need to know as individuals, how do we approach that with a loved one, but I also think we really need a significant shift in culture about death and dying. We plan births meticulously, don't we? And as for women, that's something that's really empowered for us. The other thing that we know for definite in life is, well, we might not give birth, but we will definitely die, and we will experience people that we love dying. Years ago, death happened at home, didn't it? Similar to births, very long time ago. And then we've moved to more of a medicalised era, and healthcare outcomes are a lot better. Life expectancy, like we've talked about, life expectancy is a lot better. But a disadvantage to that is people aren't dying at home, or they weren't dying at home as much as they were before. So, children had seen it. The grandma might have been dying when the mum was looking after that sort of thing. It was a bit more common everyday occurrence. The conversation about it must have been a little, maybe it was generational differences, but it was seen more, wasn't it? And then we've took it all into hospital, and now people are too frightened because they haven't experienced it in their lifetime, and then suddenly you're confronted with it when you're at the point of, well, now I'm going to die. So I'm a big advocate. I think there should be like national campaigns that we've had for checking testicles, smear testing, all of them things that have had huge positive outcomes on public health. And I think should be the same about discussing death and dying and advanced care planning, because that's a huge part of what we support with. Again, to give people back the power for what we know is ultimately this is going to happen. Let's do it on your terms as best as we can.
I know you spoke last week, Carl, about bringing death education into schools and to community events, and a lot of the funeral directors do work with local care homes to go in and just talk about kind of choices, and because we still get a lot of people when we sit down with families and say, you can have whatever you want, and they'll still say, can I have this music? Is that okay? Is it all right if I speak? Is it? It's your service, so it's your death, your service, your celebration of life. We can do whatever you want to do. Like we always say, short of sacrificing a goat, we can pretty much do whatever you want.
And that's it. I mean, there's a chap, John Adams. He's a funeral director. He's part of the NAFD and things. He's pushing the boundaries as well for sort of the child bereavement side of things and pushing it into schools. And it's a really important part of life. We go through everything at schools. And the thing that sort of it does annoy me a little bit is that we're teaching, we teach languages, which is perfectly fine, and we need languages, but we need to include life skills such as what happens when we die. Children know all about sex education, they know all about finances and all of this, and it's all taught within maths and the school curricula, and there's nothing at the minute about sort of what happens when someone dies, or how to manage, or even how to manage your emotions, or how would you feel? As soon as we start these conversations and at an early stage, and some people might disagree with me, that's fine. These are just my opinions, of course. It's just, I think that's where we need to be.
But very often for a child, sometimes their first experience of death can be a pet, and that to them is a huge kind of part of their life, a big companion or a grandparent. But sadly some children lose their parents, but kind of a grandparent and Bex was talking last week again about how resilient children are, actually, that they take it in and then go, all right, okay, what we're having for tea now? They're very quick, and it's just giving them little bits of kind of information. So yes, we are. I think that is the next campaign over my dead bodies, death education. Get us into school as well.
And I think this is why we really, as specialist palliative care teams, we push for the dying matters. We, across our area that we work, We are very much, because I'm a big believer in, if we've reached one person and we've made a difference to one person, that's one person that's been more educated than what they were before they walked in.
Yeah.
And you do often see it, don't you? When people come in and I think when I wasn't there when we had the test stall at Tesco, but you could see people kind of come in with a shopping trolley and just be like, oh, I'm looking at the logs. I walk past you as if to say there's a big poster there saying, do you, but like dying matters. And it's like, oh, and I think we have had feedback before where people are like, oh, this is a bit harsh, this is a bit real. And we're like, yeah, but this is real life. If you ask my husband, he knows exactly what songs I want for my funeral, and I've kind of said, this is what I want. And even through death, before we get to the funeral, you mentioned before about advanced care planning. And for that, it's very much, some people for death, if they want, some people don't want to be at home. Some people maybe want to be in a hospice. Some people want to be, very rarely, but in a hospital. But actually, the people who want to be at home, do you want to be upstairs or downstairs? Do you want to be with your loved ones? Do you want to be able to look out of a window? Do you want fairy lights? Do you want your children around you? And those are really little things to us that we think nothing of. But actually, to somebody who's dying, those are massive big things. And that's another part of that advanced care planning. It's kind of, it's making sure that every single wish, whether it be funeral wish or even just planning your death, that is what people want, and it's that controls.
You make a really good point, obviously, of all the different wishes and things. And it's the same when some family members, unfortunately, they're just not on palliative care, but they go into a care home, nursing home, and they haven't even decided what funeral directors they're going to be using. And I know that sounds like a matter of fact of we need to think about it, but this is definitely going to happen. So why not now, while the person is with you, if you can have the conversation? I know it's not an easy conversation to have, but even just start talking to people who are in the know. And I've got all my funeral planned out, but if I wasn't a funeral director, would I have done that? I don't know, and then you go through your own personal experiences. So I'm very lucky, I've still got all my family with us. I've got the majority of them with us. So, would I have been thinking, I need to get this in place, I need to do that? But the more people talk about it, the easier it becomes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you talked about, if you've changed one person's view on things. Carl and I have always said that about the podcast. We know we won't have hundreds of thousands of listeners. We're not some kind of, it girls talking about makeup, which have a place in the podcast market. They absolutely do. But we know we're not going to get hundreds of thousands of listeners because there's not that many people ready to have the conversations and to listen to some of the things we talk about. But if we do make it easier for one person to have a conversation about death, dying and funerals, then that's kind of what we set out to do with the podcast. So it's brilliant to hear you both talk about how passionate you are about the work that you do and the care and the empathy and the dedication you give to the families you work with. But I imagine you often get the same question that Carl and I get about, why on earth do you do that job? Are you completely nuts? So how do you guys end up here? And tell us a little bit about your story and why this matters to you.
I think, we do hear it a lot. Why do you do this? It must be really sad. It must be a really difficult job. And I'm not going to lie, it can be. It really, really can be. And we're human at the end of the day. We do go home some nights and have tears and think, oh my goodness. But I think for me especially, it's knowing that we make a difference. And I think, I don't know, is that the same for you? For me, it had come a lot. I lost my dad nearly 13 years ago, and he had cancer. And at the time I was just finished off my nurse training. And I think for us, he was very much a person that was always he was one of these that he didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want, he always wanted to be resuscitated. He always wanted to be, he wanted to be treated right until the very end. He was 56. He was too young to die. And it was really, really cruel. It was awful. But I think having a little bit of knowledge in healthcare, I could see what was happening. And I mean, for my dad, he was so determined. He went through chemo for years. He kind of went into remission. But to sort of see him going through that, for me, was very much like, okay, I'm definitely doing the right thing by becoming a nurse. But I think that's probably alongside the district nursing side of it. I knew I wanted to be a district nurse. I wanted to work in the community. But then actually, I think right from that point, I knew eventually I wanted to be and specialise within palliative care. And I think it comes down to, there was one of the, at the time, it was when they were under Macmillan, and then we had a Macmillan nurse who looked after my dad, and she was absolutely amazing. And I still say to her now, to this day, that she was like the oracle. And I can remember we still laugh, because I still see this nurse now quite a lot, and she will always kind of have that halo. She was a bit of a saviour in our darkest times, because when my dad wasn't listening to people, she would come in and she'd say jump, and he'd say, okay, how high? And it seemed to be the only person that he would actually listen to and respect. And I think for me, to have that lifeline, I was at one point that relative that was outside, that was, that I saw having conversations with my dad and going, yeah, I'm fine. And then me being outside going, he's not fine. And she's going, I know he's not fine. And this is why I've done this. And you're thinking, actually so much of that now is reflected in our practice, because I think we get a bit of a sense of what sometimes people tell us. We're very good. We've got to have a bit of detective skills, don't we? They often say palliative care, especially specialist palliative care, is more of an art, not a science. There's no right or wrongs. And sometimes you have to be a bit of a detective, and you have to kind of just go with your gut for things. And I think from that, and being on the receiving end, that for me was very much like, this is what I want to do. I don't know, there was just something special about that nurse, and there is still something very special about that nurse, and she knows that she is an amazing individual. And I think that I've used that example in a lot of my interviews, a lot of my applications and things, and I think it kind of adds a bit of a personal element to it. I think sometimes with some of our patients, sorry, I'm waffling now, but sometimes with some of our patients, you can say, can I share something with you? When you see somebody really struggling, you're like, I have been there, I've been through it. I understand. And I think one of the things we hear quite a lot is, I've never had to go through this, so I don't know how I should be feeling. I don't know whether this is the right thing. I don't know whether I'm providing the right care, the right support. And it's that reassurance, and it's knowing now that I just hope that I am, if I was even half as good as the nurse that looked after my dad and supported us through that really difficult time, I know I'm doing a good job. I think that's the big thing.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point as well that you make, that the journey that your patients are on, and how you draw from your own experiences to make sure that their journey is sort of as plain sailing and as smooth as possible. So it's the same for when I turn up to a house as a funeral director, it's not necessarily the beginning of everything, because the families have lived through, potentially, I mean, sometimes it is very short term, but other, the sort of scenarios, it's potentially a couple of years. So when we get there as a funeral director, it's not the beginning, we're partway through the journey. And I often say to the funeral directors who are coming into the industry, is just be mindful that we're not the first. That's the whole family have lived through so many different parts to this journey as such, and we're now just the next part. And our role is to continue that special journey that makes sure that we make that, because we look after. I mean, your area, it's a huge area which we'll come on to how far you cover. But it's the same with funeral directors and celebrants, is that we've got sometimes 6 or 7 funerals on the go, sometimes more.
Well, if it's only 6 or 7 on there,
it depends on how busy.
It's usually over 20.
Yeah, so we've got lots of families to look after, and your role is to make sure that family feel like they're the most important family in the world, and that their service is the only service that matters.
Absolutely.
And that's the same as when you go into care for somebody, isn't it? It's exactly the same.
And it's really key what you just hit upon there, Carl, because we often get asked, when somebody dies, who do we ring? Mm-hmm. And we are so lucky because we've got, we're just part of that journey beforehand. You know, we've got, like I say, in our team, we've got some amazing professionals that do a lot of memory work, life story work, making a lot of these memories. You know, a lot of our dietitians that do like a lot of nutritional work. You know, just trying to. It's kind of like a full team effort. And you know, as things change, we've got wonderful district nursing teams. We've got wonderful like urgent community response teams. We've got some amazing people that kind of see this patient through their very last bits of, you know, last sort of stages of life, before then actually, when that person actually dies, it's kind of like, right, it's gone from us now. And I always make it really clear and make the point and say, right, the funeral directors are going to take you into your loved one into their care, because actually it's kind of, we transfer that care from us, or the district nurses, or whoever's providing that care, whether it be in a hospital ward or anything at home, to you guys. But we very much don't really cross paths a lot, but actually it's very much like, that's us, and then actually that's the one bit we've got in common. When that person dies, it's kind of, right, we've done our bit now, we've done our planning, we've done our bit to plan the death. It's up to you now to do the funeral part. Does that make sense?
I mean,
and I think
we've mentioned this before. Is that so? You see that person up to their death, and then we take over, and ultimately, sometimes the celebrants and the vicars and ministers never meet the person. They speak about this, and that's the other thing that I'm always very mindful of, is that, you know, you always hear, oh, well, we went to a service and the vicar, they didn't know the person, but they spouted all this off. It's the story of that person is only as good as what the family can give you, because you can't just pull it out of thin air.
You can't make it up.
You don't make it up, but that would never would you make it up. I know you wouldn't. And that's the thing, is that if we start these conversations and we get people talking, and just to write a few little bits down, and, you know, I think it's a really, really big point.
Yeah, and I think there is something around, there's a marked difference with families that you sit down with where their loved one's death has been quite peaceful and planned, versus where it's been more chaotic and there's some anger there. And very often we're trying to get back beyond the death. A long time, sometimes, if somebody's passed away from dementia, we can be trying to get a long way back past that. And it's really difficult. Somebody's had a peaceful death in the way that they wanted at home, and they've talked about it and talked about their wishes. We get what we need for a really, really good service. When people are just angry because their death hasn't happened in the way they wanted, we never really get to that really good celebration. We just get the last few weeks or months before they passed away. I mean, you kind of come away thinking, we could have done more if it hadn't been such an emotive experience. It's always going to be emotive, but negatively emotive.
That's really interesting you say that, because I think sometimes with my patients I've looked after, you know them so well from that point that you've met them, probably right through to the very end. But I always think there's so much to that person, is there, before this illness and before this difficult time that they've endured. And sometimes I've been lucky enough to be asked to go to a couple of funerals, and that's really precious, because actually you get to sit and hear something that is a completely different perspective. It's from a different period to what you know, and that's so important, because there's more to people than until how their life ended.
Absolutely. We often talk about, you know, this isn't the story of their death, it's the story of their life, that we want to be really careful. You can spend a lot of time, and actually people say to us as celebrants, I spend a little bit like therapy. And actually when you say, so did your loved one pass away, had they been poorly, or has it been quite a shock? Sometimes families take a long time giving you every single little detail of what happened to lead to that death. And you sometimes think, I don't need to know any of this. I'm not going to repeat any of this in a service. That's not what a funeral service is for. But is it helping you just process that really difficult period? So you kind of underestimate sometimes the value that we bring in those conversations. So one of the things I just wanted to ask, because it can probably be a little bit confusing for people, is we hear different terms used for different bits of support. So who does what when it comes to palliative care?
That's a really good question. It's something that we often get asked quite a lot as well. And through this process, there are a lot of people. There's lots of different services that are involved within somebody's care, right from diagnosis all the way through to death. You might find there's quite a few healthcare professionals. There may be some site-specific nurses that may be sort of more disease specific, especially if it's a cancer diagnosis, so you get that support through the hospital. In community especially, there's ourselves. We will see people who have got the complex symptoms, mainly above and beyond what district nurses and the GPs can do. We are really lucky because palliative care is everybody's responsibility really, and especially within community, district nurses provide some great generalist palliative care. And that means we don't necessarily see everybody with a palliative diagnosis because actually their symptoms are managed, everything's in place. They don't necessarily need a specialist team. But then we'll come along if somebody refers in and it's above and beyond what other people can kind of offer. There's lots of other kind of charities that will provide care. There's some overnight sits. Again, every area is different. This is the thing. It's really, really tricky because, some areas they've got different charities that will provide overnight care, but others it provides the generalist day-to-day care. We're really lucky in this area because we've got charities that do the general personal care for patients that are approaching end of life. So it's kind of a full holistic, it's that sort of, everybody's got a little place to play, and it's a bit like a jigsaw really. Yeah. But it can be confusing, and we understand that it can be confusing, but I think it's knowing that there's people out there. It might be NHS, it might be a charity, it might be an external organisation, it might be a private care agency. It's just tapping into those people and making sure they're there.
And where I guess the lead on from that is there's this whole army of people who are there to support you. Where's the best place to start to find out kind of what care you need, what support you need, and who's the best person in your area, your trust, with your needs to help you with that? Where would somebody go?
You've got your cancer-specific for people with cancer. You've got your site-specific nurses. They're very good at signposting and usually the ones that would refer into us. For people who don't have a cancer diagnosis, there's other long-term conditions, teams. Your GP is a really good port of call. Yeah. Everybody has a GP. They're very good at knowing which involvement is needed. I think we're really lucky in this area, like Hayley's saying, because of what we do have on offer, because the national ambitions for good palliative care are that it should be a 24/7 service. That isn't available everywhere. Luckily, we have that in Hambleton and Richmondshire, but that doesn't just come from specialist palliative care. That comes with district nurses and the out-of-hours nursing service. It comes from the care support that we have locally, the charities that we can utilise, the GP, the out-of-hours GP. It's very much about a very wide network around the people that are most important. But if you're unsure of where your support needs to be, I maybe would signpost you to the GP originally. But what I tell my patients all the time, because we get asked that question, so when do I phone you? Who do I phone? Well, who's this then? I don't care who you phone, just phone somebody.
Yeah.
And if it might not be us for this one situation, but we will tell you where you need to go, or we will take you to where you need to go. Yeah. And equally, I would hope somebody would do that vice versa. And actually, that's for the specialist nurses. Please just always phone anybody.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because there is a huge army of all of you out there, isn't there? And I think that's one thing to know is it's reassuring to know that if you do get any or any diagnosis of anything, is you're not on your own, are you? You're not alone, because there's that many people around. It's fantastic what you do.
It is. It's really inspiring to hear you guys talk and know that support is there and that you're so passionate.
You can hear the passion, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Like Carl said, that we are an army, and we are very lucky within our team. We've got we work with some wonderful people. We work with some wonderful GPs, district nursing colleagues, people within our own teams that we are, I think the main thing is to get out of this is, one, we should be talking about death and dying. Mm-hmm. Two, it's really important to plan. But 3, we are really lucky in this area, and I think everybody is working together with the same goal. I think for us especially, we've got a patient in the middle of this, and actually if we can make a difference, if we can just change one thing, if we can just make something a bit easier for somebody, if we can give somebody a bit of quality of life, we've done all right.
Absolutely. And that is a brilliant place to, I think, end our conversation, although I think we could chat all night. But thank you, Hayley, Claire, thank you so much for coming on the show. I think the advice from that conversation was, if you are needing some support, then go to your GP, and they can probably signpost you in the right direction. But if you are really struggling and you feel like it would help to talk to us or to Hayley or to Claire, then please get in touch and we'll see what we can do to facilitate that conversation. But thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work. We are so proud of you. So thank you.
Thank you guys. Yeah.
Another tough one, Carl.
Yeah.
But an important one.
Yeah, no, I agree, definitely.
An important one. So that's a wrap on this week's episode. We are coming towards the end, I think, of series 2. Got a few more episodes to go. I think we've still got some guests in the pipeline that we're thinking about, but we'd love to hear from you in terms of anybody else you'd like us to talk to. We're trying to look at some of the technology providers that are helping families make services more memorable or to make things easier. So we've got a couple of technology people coming in and a couple of other people in the pipeline as well. So keep listening, but if there's anybody else you want us to talk to, do give us a shout and we'll try and get them involved. So Carl, what have you got on the agenda for the next week or so? Anything mayoral that you usually like to listen to?
Yeah, we was dropping it on the mayor, of course. So yeah, have I mentioned that? Yeah.
What did you?
I don't know if we spoke about the town of Culture bid. I was interviewed by BBC Look North the other day, which is going out very shortly, about our bid. So keep your eyes peeled for that. So that was quite an interesting day, I must admit.
Well, I think we did talk about it because we said Richmond Town of Culture, the bid being led by the most uncultured.
Oh, no, so was it? Yeah, that was it. We did talk about it. I do remember now. Yeah,
we did. But we're very proud of it, so keep talking about it.
Yeah, that's it. Keep talking about it.
Perfect. Cool. Well, that's a wrap for this week, guys. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back again next week. If there's anything we can do to help, please get in touch. And thank you for listening. See you on the next show.
Thank you for listening. And we really hope you enjoyed and were inspired by this week's episode. Remember that you can get in touch with us anytime to ask a question, offer to be a guest, or to request that we bust a particular myth. You can get in touch via any of our social accounts over My Dead Poddy on Facebook, Insta, or TikTok. Or you can drop us an email at overmydeadpoddy@gmail.com. Just a reminder that whilst all of us work in the funeral industry, none of us are fully qualified grief counsellors. And therefore, if you've been affected by any of the issues that we've discussed today, we highly recommend that you seek out professional or medical support to help you with those conversations. Should you need any support, please do get in touch and we can hopefully signpost you in the right direction, but we can't offer those services ourselves. Thanks for listening, and we can't wait to bring you the next episode.